Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sri Sri Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai. Kali Yuga Dharma Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Sri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Hare Krishna and welcome. Welcome to another session where we get to journey into the divine realm of Sri Vrindavan Dhama. And we get to see something very special. We get to see how the boon of blessed divine love is distributed to everyone. How everyone is a recipient of Krishna's mercy and is a recipient of that most divine love that we are all seeking. Tonight is the last night for me of Sri Purushottama Month, and so it is sadly coming to a close, this wonderfully auspicious month where we have been diving in the nectar of Sri Sri Radha Govinda over and over again, so many different ways throughout this month. It has been such a joy and a pleasure to be with all of you. It has been a privilege to be able to somehow read and have realizations with all of you. And this is going to be kind of a culmination of sweetness and ushering into the next phase of our storytelling and realizations, which will begin again tomorrow. So, the wonderful thing is that the sweetness doesn't end. It just changes shape, just a little bit. So who knows? Maybe in the coming days there will be more happily ever afters. There will be lots more sweetness. There will be more mysterious pastimes. Who knows what we will encounter in the days moving forward. But for now, let us bask in these wonderful histories once again. Of course, we cannot begin without invoking the divine realm of Sri Vrindavan Dhama amongst us by singing the celebrated short but sweet bhajan Jai Radha Madhava. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavanabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavanabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Brajujana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jashodanandana Brajujana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jai Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava Radhe Govinda Jaya Radhe Govinda Sri Sri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Govinda Dev Ki Jai Sri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Vaishnav Sangha Ki Jai. So it's kind of bittersweet as we think about all of these beautiful pastimes, but they are not gone, not for long. We can never go for very long without hearing of the heroic pastimes of Sri Krishna, so who knows? It doesn't have to be all sadness and tears. But we will begin once again with this verse from Kondinya Muni, who described so sweetly who Krishna is, what he is doing, and how he is described as Sri Purushottam himself. Govardhanadaram vande gopalam goparupinam Gokulotsavameshanam Govindam Gopika Priyam. I worship Gopal, the lifter of Govardhan, who has the form of a cowherd boy. He is the festival of Gokula and the supreme controller of all. He is Govinda and the beloved of the Gopis. By chanting this mantra with devotion during Sri Purushottama Month, one will attain Sri Purushottam himself. One should devote the Purushottama Month to constantly meditating on the two-armed form of Sri Krishna, who has the complexion of a new monsoon rain cloud, who plays the flute, who wears a yellow silk dhoti, and who is accompanied by Srimati Radharani. So we will hear a great festival of these pastimes in a very peculiar way. Tonight is about how the many inhabitants of Vrindavan are all necessary for Krishna's pastimes. How they all play specific roles in Krishna's pastimes, and how they are all receiving the treasure of divine love of God. So we begin by discussing the many birds of Vrindavan Dhama. These birds are spoken about by the Gopis throughout all of Vrindavan, and they are spoken about as great sages. They are described as munis and rishis who are constantly absorbed in observing Sri Krishna's pastimes, in observing Sri Krishna's form, and chanting the nectar of the holy name. These birds are said to be kirtaniyas, constantly absorbed in Harinam Sankirtan, the kirtan of the holy names of Sri Krishna and his most beloved Srimati Radharani. So even we hear from the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami was none other than the pet parrot of Srimati Radharani, who was lovingly instructed and implored to stay behind and somehow or other describe the pastimes of Sri Sri Radha Krishna and describe love of God for all of those like us who would come after. All of those who would sorely need these descriptions to give us life. So tonight's description begins with a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. And we'll be reading again from Sri Venu Gita by His Holiness Sivarama Swami. We've been reveling in the pastimes from Venu Gita, and we have been so much enlivened by these glorious and beautiful pastimes. So once again, we're going to be diving in to Sri Vrindavan Dhama through the pages of this wonderful Venu Gita. So our session tonight begins with a verse from the Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 21, Text 14. Prayo batamba vihaga munayo vanesmin Krishne kshitam tad uditam kalavenu gitam Aruya yedruma bhujan ruchira pravalan Srinvanti milita drisho vigatanya vacha. O Mother, in this forest all the birds have risen onto the beautiful branches of the trees to see Krishna. With closed eyes, they are simply listening in silence to the sweet vibrations of his flute, and they are not attracted by any other sound. Surely, these birds are on the same level as great sages. So through these glorious pastimes, we enter into the midst of a group of gopis, all of whom are speaking to one another. There are gopis of all ages present. There are young gopis who are there with their mothers. There are elderly gopis. There are gopis of all kinds also present. There are mystical yogini gopis like Nandimukhi, which is a Brahmani gopi who is a disciple of Purnamasi herself. Purnamasi is also present in this assembly of gopis. And Purnamasi, we said yesterday, is none other than that internal potency of Sri Krishna, Yogamaya. And as Navratri is coming for me tomorrow, I feel that it is so appropriate that Purnamasi Devi will be speaking a fair amount during this session. I feel as though she gets to inaugurate her own festival by speaking so much and allowing us to hear the good fortune of the birds and how they attain pure love. So we get to hear from her. So there are gopis of all ages present. And now we get to journey into their midst and with humble, submissive hearts somehow press our ears close to the glass and just try and hear a little bit of what will happen next. As the midday sun took a westerly course, the assembly of gopis and ladies sat in the shade of a rooftop shelter, happily speaking the glories of Sri Krishna and the birds of Vrindavan. In time, the conversation turned to the many roles the birds played in serving Sri Krishna and his various incarnations. Mukara, the grandmother of Radharani, had joined that gathering at the conclusion of Nandimukhi's shiksha on the Muni birds. So Nandimukhi was that Brahmani gopi that we spoke about earlier. So now we meet Mukara, the elderly grandmother of Srimati Radharani. Breathless from climbing the stairs and excited from a recent encounter with Jatila, she sat on an elevated platform next to Purnamasi, recounting her recent experience. Straightening her snow-white hair, Mukara said, "Having just arrived from Javat, I feel I am in quite a fix." Purnamasi placed a comforting hand on her arm. Just now, Jatila, the ever-argumentative incarnation of confusion, accosted me regarding the chastity of my beloved granddaughter Radhika. At the mention of Radharani's name, the younger girls became attentive to hear more. While walking here, I happened to meet her and that equally crooked daughter of hers called Kutila. As soon as she set her eyes on me, Jatila swooped upon me like a crow on juicy refuse. Continuing to pat her hand, Purnamasi said, There, dear, don't be so grieved." Greeting her, I inquired about the welfare of her kin and cows, continued Mukara. But she immediately turned on me, accusing my granddaughter of improper behavior with Krishna. Knowing Radhika to be pure and chaste, and Sri Krishna always absorbed in childhood play, I rejected her complaint, at which she became even more incensed. She said, "Only the other day, I saw Krishna wearing a necklace which was previously in the possession of my daughter-in-law. What obtuse explanation can you give for that, fat one?" I explained to her that Nanda Maharaj had many pearl necklaces in his treasury which resembled Radhika's, all to no avail. Infuriated, she replied, "You cruel-faced Mukara! By hearing your words, my heart feels like it is burning in a fire." Not able to contain myself further, I exploded. "You sinful Jatila! By hearing your words, there is an aching in my head. You cannot give evidence that Krishna has acted improperly with Radharani, the daughter of my daughter Kirtida. Neither can you prove that your daughter-in-law has been unchaste. You are just a foolish, impetuous witch. At this time, Sunanda Baba, the elder brother of the king, appeared and resolved the situation, sending us in different directions. So now I'm here and my blood is boiling. The ladies pacified Mukara, consoling her with sweet words. In conclusion, Nandimukhi said, I cannot say anything about my elders like Jatila, but one can know a tree by its fruit. Similarly, the glories of Jatila Devi can be understood by understanding the qualities of her daughter, Kutila. Just recently, I heard Lalita Devi giving a very clear summary judgment regarding Kutila Devi's glories, which I shall relate to all of you. As the ladies drew near Nandimukhi, quoting Lalita Saki, she said, My dear Kutila, daughter of Jatila, your breasts are as long as string beans, simply dry and long. Your nose is so gorgeous that it defies the beauty of the noses of frogs, and your eyes are more beautiful than the eyes of dogs. Your lips defy the flaming cinders of fire, and your abdomen is as beautiful as a big drum. Therefore, my dear, beautiful Kutila, you are the most beautiful of all the cowherd girls of Vrindavan, and because of your extraordinary beauty, I think you must be beyond the reach, beyond the attraction of the sweet blowing of Krishna's flute. Hearing such appropriate praise for the self-crowned princess of Yavat, that assembly of gopis burst into a rhapsody of clapping and laughter. Sadhu, sadhu, they all exclaimed. Well said, Lalite, well said. When that din of jolly humor subsided, Purnamasi Devi, who is respected as the guru of the Brijbasis, who is vastly learned in all scriptures, and who is as affectionate to Sri Krishna as his own mother Jashoda, began to narrate the adventures of Hari and his bird associates. The gopis sat respectfully at her feet, absorbed like the sages of Naimisha, desirous of hearing the Bhagavatam from the renowned Sutta Goswami, the son of Romaharshan. Yogamaya herself said, Long before this age, when Treta Yuga overlapped Dwarpara, and the piety of kings and brahmanas rivaled the gods of heaven, there lived the great king Ram, son of Dashrath. He was like a god on earth, and his piety, chivalry, sense of justice, and learning had no limits. The great sage Valmiki has recorded his deeds in the great Ramayana, which you have all heard recited in your homes as children. The ladies prepared to hear some wonderful narration from the lips of their preceptor. I have heard from my divine master, Devrishi Narad. Purnamasi paused to offer her pranams, ornamented with a silent moment of respect, and then continued, that Sri Ramachandra, the king of Ayodhya and emperor of this earth, was none other than our beloved Nandanandan in an earlier life. As he now tends to his duties of herding cows, in the past he was devoted to the Brahmanas and loved his subjects as his own children. Hearing that Sri Krishna was none other than Sri Ramachandra, a mixed response of astonishment and disbelief appeared in that assembly. Since Purnamasi was their senior and a disciple of Narad Muni himself, the gopis could neither ridicule her statement nor doubt her words. However, the tranquil and saintly qualities of Lord Ram, known to all the inhabitants of this world, was difficult to compare with the frivolous and unpredictable behavior of Gopal. While exiled in the forest, Sita, Ram and Lakshman made a truce with the great vulture Jatayu, who became the personal guard of the princess, continued Purnamasi. Jatayu was old, learned, and most of all devoted to the service of Sri Ram. Day and night he would sit in a great banyan tree in Chitrakoot forest, chanting Ram, 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 in a low voice resembling the rolling of thunder. He was just like the birds of Vrindavan, although his service excelled the greatest of great men. The story of the Ramayana was common knowledge to the ladies of Vrindavan. They heard recitals from accomplished brahmanas about the heroic exploits of King Ram, sang songs in praise of Sita and her consort, observed festival days like Diwali and Dussehra, and always glorified the chastity of Sita Devi as the ideal woman and perfect wife. Hearing this Leela Katha again from the lips of Purnamasi Devi, they heard the story of Sita's abduction at Ravana's hands as if for the first time. In fear of the great Rakshasa, the younger girls huddled in the shelter of their mother's arms and listened, transfixed, absorbed in the devotional qualities of Jatayu. Purnamasi spoke. When the magician, Marichi, assumed the form of a mystical golden deer, both Ram and Lakshman were caught in the intrigue and left the fine jewel among chaste ladies, Sita Devi, unguarded in the midst of a Rakshasa-infested forest. Seeing her guardians at a distant place, the 10-headed king of Lanka appeared in the guise of a Brahman and, overcome with lust for the wife of another, abducted the princess of Mithila and forcibly carried her off. Flying in a chariot drawn by magical mules and forcibly holding the mother of the universe, Ravan embraced his own doom in the form of Janaki, having now transgressed all codes of morality. Brave Jatayu had been a witness to everything from his perch in a nearby tree, and when Ravan took to the skies, he had the opportunity to enforce the codes of Dharma and fulfill his pledge to Sri Ram. With the name of Ram on his tongue, the great king of vultures, the younger brother of Sampati, rose into the air and confronted the invincible demon, giving many scriptural arguments to gain the release of Sita Devi. When Ravan simply laughed in scorn and continued undeterred to the south, Jatayu thought, although I am an unconquerable master of the skies, having gained the patronage of Garuda, still my strength is like a piece of straw in comparison to this Rakshasa, who is a proud, arrogant, and infested by lust. In open combat I can do nothing to stop him, as much as a fly cannot distract a maddened elephant. Still, my heart breaks to see beautiful Sita touched by anyone but Sri Ram. My eyes are scorched by such a sight, and my ears suffer to hear her pitiable cry. How can any noble being stand by while such gross injustice takes place? As Jatayu flew above Ravan's chariot, Sita held out her arms to him and cried, "O Jatayu, my dear friend and protector, please save me from this horrible demon who desires to separate me from my very life, my beloved husband Ram." Unable to tolerate Sita's plaintive cry, Jatayu, who knew that confronting the demon meant entering the jaws of death and considered no gain superior to dying in the service of Ram, and no ignominy greater than neglecting the word of his honor, attacked Ravan like lightning flashing among clouds. Jatayu fought a noble battle with his formidable opponent, scratching him with his claws, beating him with his wings, and tearing at him with his beak. Despite all effort, he was unable to divert Ravan from his sinful course, and in the ferocious fight, mortally wounded, his wings severed from his body, he plummeted to the ground like a mountain felled by King Indra. Knowing in advance that his death was imminent, Jatayu happily gave his life for Sita Devi. For devotional service to the Lord is absolute and should be executed without attachment to success or failure. Although a bird, Jatayu is the great exemplar of selfless devotion, and we should always treasure his glorious service in our hearts. The Gopis cried a torrent of tears upon hearing of Jatayu's devotion to Ram. Their faces flushed out of affection. When Purnamasi narrated the details of Jatayu's death, how the name of Ram decorated his tongue, and how his head was tenderly held in the arms of his Lord, many Gopis began to sob out loud. When she spoke of his funeral ceremony, personally executed by Sri Ramachandra, who lamented for the departure of his devotee, their pain became intolerable. Overcome by the Lord's Bhakta Vatsala, many fainted away while others became stunned. Inundated by the Gopis' ecstatic love, Purnamasi could speak no more. Her crystal tears flowed down her beautiful face and mingled with the rivulets of prema from the Gopis' eyes. That combined stream of liquid love flowed to the palace rooftop, to the garden below, where it was absorbed by the soil of Braj, that inconceivably divine land whose opulence is the affection of its inhabitants for Sri Krishna, and whose happiness is bestowing that love upon those who follow the path of the Brijbasis. While wandering with his cows and friends, Sri Krishna, impelled by the deep ecstasy of the Gopis, remembered the service rendered by Jatayu in days gone by. His eyes swelling with tears, he envisaged the birds of Braj as Jatayu's own representatives, and raising his flute to his lips, he blew into it some inconceivably sweet notes, caressing their hearts as they sat atop the trees. To further show his gratitude for Jatayu's selfless service, Sri Krishna then bestowed upon them all the birds of Braj, the ultimate perfection of life, and endowed all the birds with the boon of unalloyed love. As they sat like sages, meditating with their eyes closed, each and every bird beheld the form of Shyam Sundar appearing before them, smiling and radiant, revealing their Sthayi Bhav, their loving mood, and Siddha Deha, the eternal form for their service. Sri Krishna's act of causeless mercy upon the birds of Braj was impelled by the well wishes of the Gopis. We have heard so many times that Krishna's mercy follows the mercy of his devotees. By hearing of the glorious heroic deeds of Jatayu and expressing their deep heartfelt sorrow at this example of selfless devotion who gave his life to protect Sita Devi, the Gopis prayed for the mercy of Jatayu. They prayed that he would be given divine love. And because the Gopis had such love for this servant of Sri Ram, Sri Krishna, whose magnanimity knows no bounds, gave as a form of reciprocation divine love to all of the birds of Sri Vrindavan Dhama, considering them to be the representatives of his great devotee Jatayu. When the forest of Vrindavan, along with all its other inhabitants, witnessed Krishna's benevolence, everyone and everything became hushed in awe. Rejoicing in the good fortune of the birds, all things, moving or unmoving, observed a moment of silence. and the only sound that remained was the jewel-like chanting of the birds as they embraced Sri Krishna within their hearts and sweetly sang, O Krishna, O Krishna, O Krishna. This is the kirtan of the birds. When we hear the twittering of such beautiful birds, the glorious parrots, the cuckoos, the kokilas, all of them within Vrindavan Dham, they are embracing Sri Krishna, heart to heart. They have become even greater than the greatest sages, having attained his own love, which is hard won. It is hard to come by, but he has given it to these birds because they are the representatives of his great devotee Jatayu. Sri Krishna is always one, trying to repay the debt of love. We see that he expresses to his own mother when she chastises him, "Why are you so restless? Why are you so apt to playing with the monkeys? Why are you following them around so much?" Mother Yashoda, as an insult, she often says to Krishna, "You follow these monkeys around, you feed them, you chase them, you act restless like a monkey. Oh Vanarapriya," she calls him. And Krishna sometimes gets so angry. "You have called me a monkey? You say that I act just like the monkeys? Maybe I should go to the forest and live with them." Little Krishna, at 3-4 years old, he becomes so angry with his mother for calling him Vanarapriya, for calling him restless like a monkey. But as Sri Ram, he accepted the help of all of the Vanaras, and he didn't have anything to give them at that time. He says, "I'm living in the forest, away from my kingdom. I have nothing to give you in return for all of your help. But rest assured, I will repay you." And so Sri Krishna, from the very beginning of his life, he gives in charity to the monkeys often. The butter that he steals with his very own hands. He gives them the remnants of his very own meal. He calls them to him with his chubby lotus hands. So this is the glory of our magnanimous Govinda, always willing to repay the debt of love. All we have to do is give that loving devotional service to him. And who can give that service to him? Everyone. Even the animals of Vrindavan. Everyone is necessary for Krishna's pastimes. Shivaram Maharaj recounts yet another story. And in this story, all of the forest-dwelling beings are speaking about Krishna's pastimes. Not just the birds and the bees, but also the many cows and animals, the squirrels are speaking amongst one another. Even the trees have the opportunity to speak about Sri Krishna's pastimes. So, in this assembly of people who are speaking, the tree says, "Oh, the snakes are not so important for Krishna's pastimes. The snakes do not do so much for the meeting of Radha Govinda." And at this, it is described, the snake felt slighted that the desire tree considered him of no importance in Sri Krishna's Leela. So one Kalpavriksha tree says, the snakes are not so important. And the snake now feels upset, having heard this condemnation of his very being. Although he felt neither malice nor ill will, he was unable to control his instincts, and he hissed as if trampled underfoot. Frightened, the birds flew to a distant branch and reprimanded the ancient reptile and his leafy host. For what reason are we being subjected to the rage of Anantadev's kin? Inquired the male cuckoo. Have we offended Lord Krishna or his elder brother? Or have the lords of the nether region plotted revenge upon the dynasty of Garuda? So, we hear that the birds, they are descendants of Garuda, and the snakes are the descendants of Anantadev. And of course, the birds, Garuda, and the snakes, they are not very friendly toward one another, as Garuda has part of his diet, snakes. So they are not so friendly usually. Although in this assembly of those in Vrindavan, usually they're very fine. They coexist quite naturally. They're okay, because they're all working together to serve and make Krishna happy. But right now, this snake is hissing and showing his anger, so the birds are keeping their distance. Knowing the mind of his old friend, the Kalpavriksha tree interjected. It is my offense that has disturbed our revered guest. I carelessly accused him of having no decorative role in Hari's pastimes. For this accidental slight, he has become justifiably distressed. O Saka, I offer my prostrated obeisances at your lotus feet. Please forgive me. Just see the Vaishnav culture that is here. Even the trees are now trying to pay obeisances to the snake for offending the snake and saying that he has no decorative role in the pastimes of Sri Hari. Just see the wonderful culture where everyone is just trying to cooperate, trying to react lovingly toward one another, all in the service of the pastimes of Sri Govinda Dev. Still smoldering within, the old snake coiled upon the branch and buried his head in his tail. Look, said Shari, who is a parrot, you have hurt his feelings. I remember not long ago when this very lord of the underbrush rendered the greatest service to Sri Govinda Dev. Hearing these words, the snake opened one eye and watched as the sympathetic birds returned to their perch. I concur cent per cent, added the lady cuckoo. If you refer to the incident on the dark moon night of Shravan, when Sri Radhika was in a particularly resolute huff, I would add that this snake has not only served Govinda, but saved our lives as well. Let us see how this snake has saved not only Govinda Dev, but has saved all of Sri Vrindavan Dhama. Are we ready? What is this great event I missed while rooted to this holy spot? Asked the Kalpavriksha tree. If some pastime has transpired in which my friend is the supporting hero, please reveal this at once. Without further ado, Shari narrated a pastime great devotees retell even now, illustrating how even snakes serve the meeting of the divine couple. One dark moon night, just like tonight. This is an Amavasya story, which I thought was quite fitting for our new moon evening. One dark moon night in the month of Shravan, the first month of the rainy season, Radha and Krishna arranged to meet in a forest bower by the bank of the Jamuna. In the afternoon, Radhika prepared for her nighttime journey by throwing water over the courtyard and walking upon its muddy surface. When Lalita said, Radhe, why do you not rest before going out? She replied, No, I will have to stay up the whole night. Better I prepare now. Sleeping will only divert my mind. Before leaving her home, she closed the windows to accustom her eyes to darkness. Her astonished Sakhis said, Oh Radhe, why are you making everything dark? We cannot see you. Radhika replied from the shadows, Listen, I am training myself before going out tonight. I must be prepared. Sri Radha was so anxious to meet the Lord of her life that nothing could stand in her way. And as such, there is a poem within Prema Mala which describes Srimati Radhika's practice. Walking in the dark throughout her home, trying to make herself accustomed to the darkness of the forest so that nothing could stop her meeting from Sri Govinda. When the appointed hour came, she crossed the threshold of the house as if it were a clump of grass. Dressed in a black sari and sapphire ornaments, she vanished into the forest accompanied by one maidservant and guided by the compass of her very own heart. It is said that on the full moon nights, Sri Radha would dress in silver and white, ornamented with pearls, dressing just like the full moon. And on the new moon nights, she would dress in dark ornaments, with sapphire ornaments and a dark black sari, looking like the new moon night sky itself. Vrinda Devi had employed her most skilled maidservants to decorate the bower. She had supplied the finest delicacies and most exotic refreshments. By her order, Shuka and I were present. So this is the parrots who are speaking. They said, we were present. We were present, and thus we were eyewitnesses to the following events. Late at night, Sri Radha arrived with the expectation of passing time with the life of her life, Sri Hari. When she entered the beautifully decorated kunja, illuminated by the soft glow of many blue lamps, Gandharvika was beside herself with happiness. In her passionate excitement, Radha spoke of bygone times with Govinda. Again and again she gazed toward the entrance expecting his arrival, and with the passing of time, her anticipation only increased. But the sound of falling rain brought little consolation to my heroine as she waited for her beloved. It's raining quite heavily right now in New York. So this pastime feels as though the atmosphere is completely appropriate. Rupa said later, when Radhika entered the newly decorated kunja and saw her beautiful reflection in a mirror, she became intoxicated by happiness and smiled like a new bride. Constantly meditating upon Krishna, her desire to meet him increased without limit. So even Rupa Manjari, the small girl attendant, was there with Sri Radha. Time passed mercilessly, Sri Radha becoming increasingly desperate with every second. Longing for her beloved, she trembled, wept, and proposed various theories to explain his delay. Radha repeatedly rose to her feet, paced the floor, and gazed down the pathway. Looking through the darkness and the rain, she prayed for the sapphire-like luminance that would dispel her misery. Sri Krishna has a sapphire-colored effulgence, a glowing blue effulgence that she can tell as he goes through the forest, that will tell her as a messenger Krishna has come. And yet she sees no luminance. But hope as she did, it was not to be. What happened to Sri Krishna may never be known. Perhaps destiny truly obstructed his journey, postponing his arrival until a short time before dawn. At least, that was his story. But in the meantime, our Sakhi suffered the fate of a disappointed heroine. How she cried, how she despaired, how she sang in madness. If I were to describe her cataclysmic faints, I too may lose my sanity. Oh, let it be. Sure enough, just as Radhika stood on the threshold of death, Sri Krishna made his gallant appearance at the doorway. When Sri Radha first saw him, she appeared relieved. However, as she surveyed her beloved, her demeanor quickly changed to that of an angry goddess. When Hari stepped forward, she turned her back to him. Watching from the corner of her eyes, Radhika frowned and cried simultaneously, "Stay where you are! Do not come near me! Do not try to touch me. Don't even try. Then with veiled sarcasm, in a voice trembling with anger, she said, I suppose you have some elaborate explanation for your disheveled appearance and the drowsiness of your eyes. Why not continue your self-created sports? Why come to me now? I am but an obstacle to your frivolous enjoyment. At this, Sri Krishna fell at her feet and prayed in a plaintive voice, O Manini, I tell you, with joined palms, you are rejecting an innocent person. I waited all night for you in another kunja. I thought you had forgotten me. Then I wandered around in the forest searching for you, undergoing the austerity of being scratched by thorns. And for this hardship you accuse me of being unfaithful. How many girls are there in Gokul? No one can say, but I do not speak to any of them. I do not even glance at them. Day and night I fix my mind only on you. What more can I say? But Radha turned away. Although Sri Krishna continued to plead his case, O lotus-eyed girl, why do you not listen to a word I say? Please understand, I am your servant and belong to no one else. But she would not listen. Adamant that she would have nothing more to do with him, Radhika had Rupa Manjari toss, her quoted words, that black person out of this kunja. As Sri Krishna stood motionless in the pouring rain, his clothes dripping wet, his peacock feather crushed, and his hair disheveled, rivulets of rain poured down his lotus face. Perhaps his tears also mixed with the rain. I could not say. Seeing this tender youth in such dire straits, I thought my heart would break. And I was not the only observer to this scene, for all of Vrindavan tottered on the edge, the very brink of collapse. How could anyone tolerate the wretched, pitiful condition of its beloved crown prince? How could the inhabitants of Braj tolerate the pain and suffering of Radha Krishna's separation? How could anyone envisage a sunrise tainted by Radharani's anger? Was there someone to save the world from such a portentous fate? As mentioned earlier, all living things may have met their end had our distinguished friend the snake not made his entrance. Radhika's anger became directed at all bluish black objects as she discarded her black sari, removed her blue bangles, and removed the musk dot from her chin. Had Shamala appeared, I know Radha would have neglected her only because of her name, Shamala. When Rupa tried to pacify her anger, Radhika responded by throwing all the peacock feathers out of the kunja. In her unyielding mood, she threatened to pulverize a nearby tamal tree. And she even removed the mirrors to avoid the sight of her own black hair. She is very angry. Just then, impelled by his own good sense and guided by the counsel of Yogamaya, this worthy agent of the Nagas entered the kunja, his eyes flashing mystically, his tongue darting here and there, his crown jewel blazing like fire. Our snake friend raised his hood to human height and hissed at Sri Radha with mysterious intent. When I saw the snake, I searched for some means to save Radha. Therefore, it is difficult to say what happened next. Everything moved so quickly. Within the blink of an eye, I observed Gaurangi hanging from Shyam Sundar's neck, crying, save me, O Shyam, save my life. Sri Krishna seemed unconcerned about the snake, but he was extremely pleased at the turn of events. Fate had fashioned an extraordinary garland to hang gracefully about his neck. I did see him cast a sidelong glance of gratitude at our friend. He seemed to say, "I am forever indebted to you for this service. Dear friend, from now on consider me yours." Therefore, I say that this great soul is the intimate servant of Radhe Shyam and the savior of Vrindavan. Rather than faulting him, we should sing his glories. We should learn from him the art of uniting Sri Krishna with his beloved. At the conclusion of this lovely pastime, the snake became elated by Shari's appreciation. He raised his hood and began to sway to and fro, dancing to the sound of Hari's name. All the birds joined him, and for some time there was a blissful kirtan celebrating the servant of Radha Krishna's meeting. All glories to the animals of Sri Vrindavan Dhama. All glories to the snakes and the birds who even participate in the meeting of Sri Sri Radha Govinda. And all glories to Sri Sri Radha Govinda, who drown the inhabitants of Vrindavan and all of their devotees in an ocean of bliss and love by their unparalleled sweet pastimes. Sri Vrindavan Dhama ki jai. This is how everyone is blessed with the boon of love. This is how everyone is given the great benediction of love for all. Everyone and everything is worthy of our pranams and our obeisances within Vrindavan Dham. And Sri Vrindavan Dham can be made to appear anywhere and everywhere, as long as these blissful pastimes are recited and heard by eager and loving hearts. So, I offer my pranams and my deepest appreciation and obeisances to all of you. You all have appeared just to help join Sri Sri Radha Govinda. You all have helped in the meeting of Sri Sri Radha Govinda. You all have helped in this extraordinary kirtan of the glories of Sri Sri Radha Govinda. And so, I offer you all my obeisances, my pranams, and my deep appreciation. You all have my affection as great servants of Radha Govinda. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your affection. Thank you all for your love. Thank you all for your eagerness to hear about the pastimes of Radha Govinda, just like all of the forest-dwelling animals and inhabitants of Sri Vrindavan Dham. We are securing our place night after night within that divine realm. By hearing these stories and listening with enraptured attention and with love, we are securing our place among those great souls. Just one day, eager to witness firsthand those very same pastimes, eager to hear their tumultuous kirtan, and eager to join in singing the names of Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda Radhe. Tomorrow, we start a new journey. We will go and we will see the pastimes and activities of the goddess, of Yogamaya, of Devi Ma herself. We will take adventure after adventure after adventure, and we will see what Krishna's own younger sister, what she does, and how she does it. She's quite heroic, and an emblem of protection for those who are devoted to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. She is the best friend of the bhaktas. And so her protection is always needed, and her guidance is always much appreciated. If anyone knows how to please her brother, it would be her. So we will take shelter of this divine goddess during these 9 days of Navratri, and we will pray each day that in her many varied forms, that she protects our love for Govinda Dev, and that she helps it bloom and blossom under her own guidance, that she teaches us how to love Govinda Dev with such unswerving devotion, with such heroism, with such courage and determination. She will protect us. She will enlighten us. She will grace us with her very own mercy. So until then, I look forward to the next adventure with all of you. And we'll see each other soon. Sri Sri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dhama ki jai. Vaishnav Sangha ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. See you all soon.